Hello. Welcome to the first tutorial for MAS. MAS is a MIDI generator that meshes algorithmic pattern building with physics-based evolution. This tutorial focuses on how to get from nothing to something. I've already configured some synths in my DAW to receive notes from MAS via MIDI. For deeper understanding and technical details of anything we've covered here, please feel free to check out the manual linked in the description below. In MAS, your creations are known as compositions. Let's dive into what a composition is and build a simple one from scratch. Before we get too deep, let's take a look at some global settings we can configure. By single tapping on any empty area of the screen, we can bring up our controls dock. The gear button opens the system settings. MAS can sync to either an internal or external MIDI sync clock. The clock tempo is saved with the composition. We also have the ability to route MIDI to or from any ports available to the device we're running on. MAS includes a simple built-in synth that's helpful when you're working on a composition but aren't connected to any external gear or other apps. It's important to note that the clock, MIDI, and internal synth settings are only available in the standalone version of MAS. Anytime you need to reference the manual or revisit this or any other tutorial video, check out the help section at the bottom of settings. For now, let's go back to the top and look at something we've ignored, the pitch quantizer. This is where we configure the possible notes that MAS can output from the current composition. Settings in this block are saved with your compositions. Let's make some quick changes and then start composing. For today's composition, I'm going to work in E pentatonic, so let's go ahead and change our root and scale parameters. Now I'd like to restrain the note range a bit. Let's go ahead and adjust that while we're here. The note range control is more complicated than a normal slider. We can adjust the width of the range in either direction and move the entire range up or down, all from this control. Compositions in MAS contain 1 to 16 parts, each functioning as a self-contained event generator. Let's add our first part. Double tapping in any empty area of the composition adds a new part at that location. Parts default to being note generators. If we hit the play button, we'll start getting note output right away. Let's add a second part, and then we'll get into an overview of some part configuration. Every part has its own pattern that is completely independent from other parts. We'll dive deep into the pattern system in another video, but for now let's check out how we can change a pattern's loop length. I'd like to set our second part's loop to be 5 beats long. Swiping left or right in the part editor navigates through the parts in your composition. I'm going to set our first part's loop to be 3 beats long. This is the seed of what could be a pretty cool polyrhythmic sequence. Let's add some motion to this composition. In the physics section of the part editor, we find the direction controller. As with patterns, this will be explored more deeply in another video. For now, we'll add some motion to our part by dragging the control and releasing. Both parts are physically active, so if we aim well, we can set both of them in motion here. So, we've looked at some settings and explored the basics of composition building. We aren't done just yet, though. Before we close out this video, I want to give you an intro to events. Let's focus on the trigger event for part 1. All parts default to sending a note event when their pattern triggers. We can easily alter which axis controls the note and velocity for that event. The MIDI values are determined by the part's position on the respective axis. All changes are immediate, so feel free to poke around with your events while the transport is running. Events in MAS can either send MIDI out into the system or they can send controls inwards to the composition. For any MIDI event, you can individually change the send channel. For now, I'm going to send this event to channel 2, where I've already configured another instrument in my DAW. Any of the 3 events that a part contains can be set to any type. Let's look at a way to play notes every time this part collides with a wall. I'm going to toggle on wall collisions here, and I'll change it to be a note event. Notice that I'm leaving the channel set to 1. This allows us to control one instrument or parameter with a repeating pattern and another with much more random physical events. I liked this mini composition a little better without the random notes, so I'll turn this event off for now. I do want to show you an example of continuous events though. All parts have a continuous event. These events send out messages at a rapid, constant frequency. Back in my DAW, I've already configured my instrument on channel 1 to respond to controls 3 and 9 for glide and envelope release, respectively. Let's configure our event to match those controls and then turn it on. I hope this introduction to the basics of Mass helps you get going on your journey with it. Remember to check out subsequent tutorials to get deeper into it and find technical details in the Mass User Manual. If you ever get stuck, reach out and let us know.